Welcome to another edition of the Big News Roundup. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. The Trump administration agrees to withdraw hundreds of federal agents from Minnesota after local officials finally surrender to their demands. A Democratic congresswoman calls for the Department of Homeland Security to be completely abolished, saying it's the greatest current threat to the American people. And Vice President J.D. Vance fires back after a New York Democrat blatantly suggests that some people would be completely justified if they ever shot a federal agent. Also, the man convicted of trying to kill President Trump finally sentenced for his crimes, and you won't believe your ears when you find out just how much fans are currently willing to pony up for a cheap seat in the nosebleeds at this year's Super Bowl. All this and much more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. You have a great deal to get to today, and we'll begin right here. In a surprising reversal of policy, President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, announcing a significant drawdown of hundreds of federal agents from Minnesota, likely marking an end to the federal government's current immigration enforcement surge in the area. Homan says that thanks to encouraging cooperation from local law enforcement, plans are now in the works for 700 federal agents to leave the Twin Cities as soon as possible, and furthermore that his ultimate goal is a complete drawdown of the thousands of federal officers who are still operating in that region. The border czar says that right now the Trump administration is able to reduce their presence in the area because they're currently working hand in hand with a number of Minnesota counties who are now allowing ICE agents to take custody of illegal immigrants before they're ever released from custody and sent back out onto the streets, the mean streets. Claims that this unprecedented level of collaboration, it allows ICE to be much more efficient in their operations by permitting far fewer officers to take custody of criminal aliens rather than forcing the agency to flood the community with a bunch of officers in order to locate and arrest any threat to public safety. Furthermore, Homan also says that local leaders, including Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, are on board with his decision, that they've had several productive discussions, and that even though they don't always agree, he is hopeful they'll be able to work together responsibly and make that entire region safer. Now, for his part, Walz admits the move is definitely a step in the right direction. However, he also complains that the drawdown should be faster and larger, that state-led investigations into the killings of both Alex Preddy and Renee Good are desperately needed as well, and that what he calls the Trump administration's campaign of retribution must immediately come to an end. Listen to the corrupt shot caller. In the meantime, Walz is also taking heat from a bunch of people on Capitol Hill. In the latest blow to his bloated ego, a top Republican on the Senate Investigations Committee is now demanding to see oversight records from Minnesota's Department of Human Services in order to figure out precisely how they were able to get their hands on billions of dollars in taxpayer money. Yeah, I'm like you. I want my money back. Also, a new report now reveals that by the time Walz recently ended his bid to run for a third term as governor, he had already salted away nearly $3 million in campaign contributions, and that moving forward, he'll likely use that cash to support his fellow Democrats in any way he can. Check out Daddy Warbucks there, Daddy Tim Bucks, buying elections for his pals. I don't think I like that. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. I just adore Minnesota. Pretty nifty place, and here's how it all pans out. They've got nearly 12,000 lakes. The state gave us rock stars. You got Prince, Bob Dylan, and more. Oh, and check this out. Minnesota is the birthplace of great inventions like the Post-it note, rollerblades, and water skiing. Yeah, the winters are cold, summers are workable, and there's a great deal to see and do in our nation's 32nd state. However, ineffective state and local leadership have cast a wicked shadow over a once legendary part of our country, and getting the sun to shine once again, especially in winter, it's going to take a great deal of time, patience, effort, and a change in how the state is managed. In my mind, that state needs a big, giant, under new management sign. Now, to be clear, over the past several weeks, at the core of anything and everything that's gone wrong in that state, and more specifically in the Twin Cities area, it's all been intentionally manufactured. Everyone knows Minneapolis has a substantial problem with illegal immigrants. Also, federal law enforcement officials were deployed to the area to address the issue, and they were met with unnecessary and even violent conflict. You watched it all unfold. I did as well. Corrupt Governor Walz, the brutally wealthy Ilhan Omar. How'd she get all that dough? Mayor Fry, Foolish Fry, we call that one, and others manipulated the narrative, got everyone worked up into a lather, and all while encouraging crime, chaos, and violence. Mission accomplished. Fortunately, the feds, they stood their ground, and while they're reducing their footprint, they'll still have a presence in the state, and much to the governor's chagrin, sorry, Timbo, they'll continue with their lawful mission. And by the way, for our country's former border czar, that one, cackling Kamala Harris, you want to ask that current border czar, Tom Homan, for his autograph. That's how you get the job done. You bring him in, Kamala, and he escorts them out. And when he signs that autograph, he'll be a real signature. No auto pens with that guy. All right, switch things up just a bit now. Shift our focus to a loudmouth Illinois Democrat who's promising to do everything in her power to eliminate the Department of Homeland Security entirely before eventually punishing every single member of the Trump administration for their alleged crimes. After that, maybe she can close all the fire departments, too. She's on to something. Following weeks of unruly protests in both Minneapolis and throughout the entire country, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez now claims that the greatest threat to our entire nation is DHS itself, and that as a result, she's going to make sure the department gets completely dismantled as soon as possible. Maybe she'll close our nation's hospitals after that. So, Ramirez is a vocal member of a legion of Democrats who are currently in the process of holding up a critical spending bill that includes funding for both DHS and ICE, which they argue are both greatly in need of complete overhaul, if not outright elimination, following the recent shootings in Minneapolis. It's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Makes no sense. For her part, the Illinois lawmaker argues that DHS has been a bad apple from the very beginning, that it was originally invented to violate our individual rights in the first place. No, it wasn't. And that ever since it was born, the entire department has been acting with total impunity. Maybe she'll shut down our nation's libraries as well. She goes on to say that, in her opinion, Americans are also sick and tired of trying to fix a department that executes people in broad daylight, and that, therefore, ICE should be completely abolished as well. I think somebody's been dipping into the cooking sherry. For starters, Ramirez says Congress needs to send a very loud message to the Trump administration by no longer infusing any resources whatsoever into Homeland Security Department's lawless abuse of power. Additionally, now she's taking it a step further by putting her foot down, now demanding what she calls accountability from a number of leading voices in the current Trump administration. In her own words, that so-called accountability means bringing justice to every fascist, every one of them in the entire administration, and that includes Kristi Noem, according to her, also Tom Homan, and some others, and eventually making them all answer for their alleged crimes. This gal has a great future as a fiction writer. Final thought, and this is what we call the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, here's the way I see it. I say congratulations are right now in order for the honorable representative from Illinois, Delia Ramirez, who's officially being awarded what we call the legendary News Roundup BOTY Award, B-O-T-Y, or the Bonehead of the Year Award. Now, Editor Pronoff, show us that fabulous trophy if you would. This award, it's handed out only sparingly to individuals who say the most dim-witted thing anybody can say. And yeah, she said it. Dismantle the Department of Homeland Security. You're a dunce. She'd taken 8 seconds out of her busy life to learn the mission of the DHS. With honor and integrity, we will safeguard the American people, our homeland, and our values. She would have most likely kept her trap shut. So, and apparently she doesn't know, DHS was born from the commitment and resolve of Americans all across the country in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, which we all remember very well. The DHS is in place to prevent future attacks against the U.S. and our allies, and sorry, Ms. Ramirez, if that's somehow a conflict for you. And one more thing, there are no fascists in the Trump administration, not even one. And if the Congresswoman would invest even 2 minutes worth of her valuable time to learn what fascism is and what it means, she'd most likely retract her idiotic comments. Hey, we'll stick with a bit of a related topic now and turn our attention to Capitol Hill, where a provocative and potentially threatening remark from a well-known troublemaker in Congress now forcing Vice President J.D. Vance to ride to the rescue. I've said it before. I'll say it again. VPJD, come on down. So, in a wild rant during a recent meeting of the House Judiciary Committee, obnoxious New York Rep. Jerry Nadler brazenly claimed that ICE agents are nothing more than mere goons who basically deserve to be shot. Now, there's a fine American for you. In that hearing, Nadler says that right now the biggest problem in our country is the current fascism on our streets and more specifically the constant attacks on American citizens by masked hoodlums. Goes on to say that if a person was ever attacked by someone wearing a mask, you might think you were actually being kidnapped, and as a result, you'd be completely justified in shooting your attacker simply in order to protect yourself. This Nadler fella, he's mildly confused. Meanwhile, as if that wasn't enough, the well-known Democrat doofus, he doesn't stop there, goes on to accuse ICE agents of breaking into people's homes without any warrant whatsoever, dragging those innocent American citizens out into the streets while they're wearing nothing more than their skivvies, and even shooting people just for driving a car. Jerry Nadler is the reason, I'll tell you, they have safety caps on medicine bottles. What was he thinking? In the meantime, like many red-blooded Americans, Vice President Vance has apparently had enough of this fool, and he recently let him have it. He says that as one of the highest-ranking Democrats in the House, Nadler should definitely know better. But instead, he's openly advocating for people to shoot federal law enforcement. Additionally, Vance goes on to say that, in a nutshell, the congressman's snide remarks amount to repugnant and despicable behavior, especially coming straight from the mouth of an elected official. Final thoughts, and this is what we call the News Roundup Lowdown, and the way I see it, here's the skinny. Nobody wants to belly up to the mic and say it, so I'll be the bad guy. I'll deliver the tragic news. Our country is right now at war, but not with Russia, China, North Korea, or Iran. Our country is also right now at war, but not with Venezuela, Vietnam, Canada, or even Cuba, or as Jack Kennedy used to say, Cuba. Our country is at war right now, and the enemy is found from within right here. The left has declared war on everything the right is doing, and in the process, they're trying to divide each and every one of us and then dismantle and destroy the USA. You got the liberal left doing all they can to bring in illegal immigrants by the millions and millions, and when the conservative right jumps in to stop the chaos, lawlessness by arresting and deporting those individuals, here comes Geriatric Jerry. He enters the fray and tries to gum up the works by encouraging lawbreakers to shoot law enforcement officers, federal officers. It's actually a pretty good plot for a low-budget, direct-to-streaming movie, but in real life, when you simply point a gun at law enforcement, you'll end up with more holes in your body than a chunk of Swiss cheese. Nefarious Nadler is doing nothing short of polluting the minds of the illegal immigrants and essentially encouraging them to use deadly violence against federal law enforcement agents, and all as a means to an end to create civil war. Jerry Nadler, you're a bad man, you're a horrible leader, and you're downright dangerous. Take a nap and resign your position immediately. I return now to another disturbing story dealing with freedom of religion, forced organ harvesting, if you ever heard of that, and the brutality of the Chinese Communist Party. Here's what we know. In a fierce rebuke aimed squarely at the leaders of China, a former U.S. ambassador at large for religious freedom, Sam Brownback, now says that the communist country's current treatment of religious believers within their borders completely delegitimizes their entire regime. At a large gathering in Washington to open this year's International Religious Summit, the well-known Republican politician pointed specifically to the communist regime's abhorrent treatment of Falun Gong practitioners, calling it more than barbaric, and accusing them directly of forcibly harvesting the organs of their political prisoners. Then goes on to disparage the CCP even further by rhetorically asking how they can ever expect to run the entire world if this is the way they treat their own people. Perhaps another expert who appeared on stage at the summit sums it up best by putting it this way. These kinds of cruel practices reveal the true character and the dark evil that lie at the very heart of the despicable Chinese communist regime. Now, a couple of additional headlines we're also keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. First, the man who was convicted of attempting to assassinate President Trump while he was playing golf in Florida back in 2024. That's 59-year-old Ryan Routh. He's now been sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison without ever the possibility of parole. Moving along, a group of left-wing American civil rights group have just issued a travel alert for tourists who plan to visit the U.S., saying that their rights, liberty, and physical security could all potentially be in danger, especially if they make a stop in Florida. In the meantime, Governor Ron DeSantis is hard at work as he tries to completely eliminate property taxes throughout the entire Sunshine State. Accomplish that, and we move the news roundup to FLA, to Florida. Come on down. And on the international scene, the last remaining nuclear weapons deal between the U.S. and Russia now officially expired, sparking fears of a new arms race between our two nations. Meanwhile, Ukrainian, Russian, and American negotiators all currently in Abu Dhabi, where they're trying to hammer out terms of a peace deal and finally bring an end to Moscow's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. And now a quick gander at a bit of showbiz news, and we kick things off today in Hollywood, where a former Wolf of Wall Street is raising eyebrows with his complete physical makeover. Now, according to reports, formerly chubby Jonah Hill, now thin as a rail, looking completely unrecognizable as well, especially after shaving his head and growing a long gray beard for his upcoming film with megastar Keanu Reeves. You know, as a general rule, I've always said new is better than old. I'll take a new Cadillac over an old Cadillac, a new TV over an old TV. The paradigm changes, though, when Jonah Hill is involved. The new Jonah Hill, down to 80 pounds, he's bald and sporting a gray beard. Kind of reminds me of my 8th grade math teacher. The old Jonah Hill looked healthy and happy, and if nothing else, he sure didn't look hungry. In any event, the new flick sounds pretty reasonable with a handful of big stars, so check it out when it comes out. And Jonah Hill, bulk up, man. Have some pasta and a Dr. Pepper. Also in the world of sports, the biggest football game of the year, finally upon us, and in a desperate bid for attention, dozens of advertisers going for broke, hiring a number of A-list celebrities to hawk their wares. And among the legendary superstars you can expect to see appearing in stupid commercials and trying to be funny on Super Sunday, you got George Clooney, Kurt Russell, Matthew McConaughey, and a whole bunch more. Meantime, if you're more interested in the game itself and you want to see it in person, one of the cheapest seats currently available, going for just under 5,000 greenbacks. Not exactly a huge fan of that goofy football game, the Super something or other, whatever they call it, but the legendary commercial, they're kind of fun to watch. And a spoiler alert, I already know who's going to win the big game. It'll be New England over Seattle, and that's pretty much because the costumes worn by the Patriots far superior to the costumes worn by the Seahawks. They have no fashion sense. Sorry to break the news to you, Cousin Barbara, in Seattle, but get some better costumes and come back next year and try again. But no hard feelings. You're still my favorite cousin, but don't tell Cousin Melissa. And now it is time to call it a wrap on the big news roundups. Have an awesome day today. Stay safe. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button right there. It's pretty basic. And with that, we're going to dim the lights and fade to black, and we'll see you right back here next time for another episode of the Big News Roundup.